All right, let's get into one of the wildest stories to ever be declassified. Seriously, we're talking about the Cold War and a time when the CIA looked at a common house cat and thought, spy. This is the absolutely true story of Project Acoustic Kitty. So you have to put yourself in the mindset of the 1960s. The Cold War is in full swing. Tensions are sky high. And for an agency like the CIA, there's one question that trumps all others. How do we know what the other side is planning? Getting close enough to Soviet officials to hear what they were saying was the holy grail of intelligence. But it was also, practically impossible.
You couldn't just send a person in with a wire. They would be spotted in a second. No, they needed something different, a completely new kind of operative.
I mean, just imagine an agent who could just stroll right up to a KGB officer meeting an informant on a park bench. An agent who could just hang out on a windowsill during a secret briefing and be totally, completely invisible to everyone there.
And that was the real key, wasn't it? The perfect spy couldn't look like a spy. It had to be the absolute last thing on Earth anyone would ever think to check for a microphone. And that was the CIA's incredible top-secret answer: a cat. Yes, an actual cat. They were convinced that an ordinary, furry feline was the key to unlocking their enemy's most guarded secrets.
So you're probably asking, why a cat? Why would they ever land on this idea? Well, it all came from the immense pressure of the Cold War. Gaining an intelligence edge was everything. And frankly, the old ways of doing things just weren't working.
And I mean, look at the challenge they were up against. Trying to plant a bug inside a Soviet embassy was a nightmare. Sending in human agents was incredibly risky. They could be captured, or worse. They were desperate for new, creative methods, and so the task fell to their tech wizards, the Directorate of Science and Technology.
And this is where the idea for an acoustic kitty was officially born. Now, it sounds like something straight out of a spy comedy, but for the people working on this, it was a very serious, very cutting-edge project. And the logic, right from their own declassified memos, was actually kind of simple. A cat can go places a human can't. The whole idea was to create a living, breathing, walking bug that could get itself into position.
Think about it. Who really notices a stray cat? It could just wander up to a couple of high-value targets having a hushed conversation in a public park, and nobody would give it a second thought. The cat's natural behavior was its own perfect disguise. Okay, so having the idea is one thing, but actually building a cyborg spy cat, that's a whole other level of difficulty. It was going to require this incredibly delicate mix of high-tech electronics and, well, veterinary surgery.
The procedure itself was just, wow. A veterinarian had to surgically implant a tiny microphone right into the cat's ear canal. Then, a small radio transmitter and a battery were actually placed inside its chest. And get this, a super thin wire antenna was carefully woven into its fur, all the way down its spine.
Now, this wasn't some cheap back-of-the-napkin idea. The total cost of Project Acoustic Kitty, from research to the tech to the surgeries, is estimated to be around $20 million. That is a serious investment, which just goes to show how badly they wanted this to work. And that brings us to what was maybe the project's single biggest flaw. I mean, it's one thing to surgically implant all this spy gear into a cat. It's a completely different problem to actually get the cat to go where you want it to go, right? How do you command an animal that's famous for doing whatever it wants? Well, after years of work and all that money, the big day finally arrived. The Acoustic Kitty was ready for its first and, as it turns out, its only real-world mission. The whole thing was happening right in Washington, D.C., and pretty much the entire project was riding on this moment. So, the objective was simple. There were two guys sitting on a park bench that the CIA wanted to listen in on. All the cat had to do was cross the street from the team's van and get close enough to that bench to start transmitting their conversation. Simple. So there they are, parked in an unmarked van. It's the moment of truth. They open the door, and out walks their highly trained $20 million feline agent. Now, it was supposed to go towards the park. Instead, the cat took maybe a few steps and then almost immediately just wandered right out into the middle of the road. And just like that, it was hit by a taxi. Unbelievable. All those years of research, millions and millions of dollars spent, a whole team of scientists and spies and veterinarians, and the very first mission was over, a complete and total failure in less than a minute. As you can probably guess, the CIA pulled the plug on the whole project right then and there.
but their final, official conclusion on what went wrong is almost as amazing as the project itself.
So get this. In their final memo, they actually called the project a scientific success. They pointed out that the work they did to miniaturize all that electronic equipment was a huge achievement. The problem, they wrote, was a practical one, and I quote, "They could not train the cat to behave reliably." Yeah, think?
So in the end, after spending $20 million, the brilliant minds of the CIA came to the exact same conclusion that anyone who has ever owned a cat could have told them for free. A cat is going to do what a cat wants to do.
You know, Project Acoustic Kitty is more than just a funny spy story. It's a pretty fascinating look at what happens when you have these incredibly ambitious, high-risk, moonshot kinds of ideas. Sometimes they push technology forward in ways you'd never expect. But they're also a very, very expensive reminder that sometimes even the most brilliant high-tech plan can be completely wrecked by one simple, furry, and very unpredictable reality.